everyone. So today we're starting the percent unit, and we're going to be defining percent and then looking at something called the percent proportion. So some of this should feel like a review from previous grades, but it's going to prepare us well for the unit. And you will see some of what we're doing is going to build on what we did in our second unit with proportional relationships. Okay, so the definition of a percent, we're going to say it's the number of parts per 100, like per 100 parts. So a way to write that is I can think of my percent is the number of parts out of 100 total. Okay, so we'll dive in. We'll see what I mean by that. Okay, so looking at my picture here I have 100 parts. That's my whole is 100 different parts. Okay, imagine all these white squares are rectangles are the same. They're all supposed to be the same, and they need to be the same. These need to be equal parts. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 columns across, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 rows. Okay, so if I think about my whole, okay, that's going to be 100. I have 100 parts. That's my total. And then let me think about how many parts I have. Well, and when I say I have, I mean like how many of the 100 rectangles are colored in green, right? Because that's what I'm thinking of. Here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay, so I can set up a fraction, a ratio, where my parts to my whole is 5 out of 100. 5 parts for every 100. Okay, so that actually, that gives us my solution. So let me look at my definition again of my percents. The number of parts per 100. So I have 5 parts here shaded in out of 100. So that means that this is equal to 5%. When I have 5 out of 100, I have 5%. So 5% of this diagram is currently filled in. All right, now let's look at a little bit of a harder example. All right, so now I didn't change a ton, but I basically changed the number, my whole, I changed the number of parts I have in my diagram. So let me figure out in this situation how many parts I have that makes up my whole. What's the total number of parts? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across, and then still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows. So to figure out the total number, I can do 5 times 10. That means there's going to be 50. There's 50 of those rectangles, 50 parts. Okay, and now I want to figure out, okay, how many parts of those 50 do I have? Well, that actually hasn't changed. I have 5. 5 are filled in. So now I want to figure out, okay, what's my percent? Well, it's no longer 5% because the definition of a percent is the number of parts per 100. But I don't have 100 parts. I have 50 parts here. Like that's the number. It's my whole, it's my total number, right? So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to find an equivalent ratio to 5 divided by 50, where 100 is my denominator. Okay, and then this is going to end up being my percent up there. So there's a ton of ways to solve this. We did it with ratios, lots of different ways. We'll continue to. But let's just look at this. I have 50, and ask myself, 50 times what number gives me 100? 50 times 2 gives me 100. So then I'm going to do the same thing up here. I have 5 times 2. What is 5 times 2? Perfect, 10. Thus, what I figure out is that the fraction, or the ratio, 5 divided by 50, that's equivalent to 10 divided by 100. So in this situation then, the number of parts per 100 parts is going to be 10. I'm going to have 10 parts filled in for 100. So if I were to take this picture and like double it, okay, I took my picture and I doubled it. Now I have 100 parts total, so my whole is 100, and now I have 10 parts filled in. So that's why, okay, so we can use that to figure out that 5/50 is equal to 10 over 100, so that means this is equivalent to 10%. Okay, because that 10 is in the numerator over 100, just like we think about our definition of percent. Okay? Awesome, so this is going to lead us into what's called the percent proportion, which is basically what we just did, it just becomes a little bit more general. So the percent proportion, remember a proportion is when we have two equivalent ratios that are set equal to each other. So this is going to set up the idea of a percent, and it's basically what we just did. We're going to take the part, normally just say part, the part, how many parts we have, divided by our whole, the total number of parts, so like a whole. So we take our part divided by our whole, that's going to be equal to my percent divided by 100. So again, thinking about what we just did, right? This is the example we just did. We had that our part was 5, my whole was 50, right? Because there was a total of 50 parts, 5 of them were filled in. We set that equal to my percent divided by 100, and we figured out, well, that was equivalent to 10 divided by 100. So my percent then is 10%. Right, that's what we just did. And this percent proportion is it's like a general form of that. We can always take our part divided by our whole. That's going to be equal to the ratio of my percent divided by my 100. Okay, before we move on, we're going to look at this a lot over the next few days. But before we move on, let's just look at one really quick example of it that might ground it for you. So let's say I give you a test. Okay, the test has 20 questions and you get 15 of them right. So my whole is 20 because there's 20 questions, and then my part is 15. That's the number that I got right. Okay, and I'm saying that that's going to be equal. I can set that equal to my percent divided by 100 to figure out what you got on the test. Because you're going to, the entire way we grade is based on percents. You get 15 out of 20. I don't put you don't get a 15. That's not what shows up on the grade. 15 is an F. You get a 75%. Why? Well, because 20 times 5 equals 100. And then, so we have to do 15 times 5. And 15 times 5 is 75. Thus, if you get 15 out of 20 right, you get a 75%. Okay, so that's always how it works. That's how we think of percents. It's the number of parts out of 100. Okay, now we're just going to quickly review how we can convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. Okay, so we're now going to convert between fraction, decimal, and percent form. I just want to know before we start, there's a lot of different ways I could do this, depending on what I start with, right? So I'm just going to go through in this order, fractions to decimals to percents, because that ends up being kind of a quicker way for a lot of people. But you can go between any of these in any order. So we'll just, keep that in mind. If there's a way that you think makes more sense to you, that's awesome. Just make sure you get the right answer, okay? All right, so for my fraction form for this picture, when you think of a fraction, that's like my part over my whole. So I want to think, okay, what's my total whole? I have 50. Okay, this is what we've been using, 5 times 10, 50. And then what's my part? How many of these are shaded in? Well, this is 2 times 10 here. That's 20. And then I have 21, 22, and 23. So I have 23 out of 50 is going to be my fraction form. Okay, then I want to get this into decimal form. A lot of ways you could do it, but probably the simplest, if you have a calculator for sure, you can just divide, right? Because the fraction 23 divided by 50, that's the same thing as 23 divided by 50, right? Because a fraction bar is division. Super important you know that. A fraction bar means division. Okay, and it's actually where it comes from with these little dots. is you can take 23, move it up here to our numerator, takes the place of the 1 dot, and then 50 to the denominator takes the place of the bottom dot. So it's like actually how the notation comes from. Okay, so if we have a calculator, or if you want to do division by hand, we can do 23 divided by 50, and you're going to get 0.46. Okay, I did that by dividing. So fraction to decimal, we're just dividing numerator by denominator, right? Just like a fraction, like what a fraction is. Okay, then we want to go from our decimal to our percent. To go from a decimal to our percent, we're going to multiply by 100. It's because this is connection to my fraction thing too. 0.46, that's the same thing as 46 hundredths. Like if we're in the best mathematical terminology, that's how we would read this. 0.46, 0.46, we're kind of lazy about that. What this means is 46 100ths. Okay, so that means that it's just 46%. You're just taking that number 0.46, 46 100th, and multiplying by 100, and that's going to give you 46. So it's 46%. But you're really just moving the decimal place over 2 to the right, and when you divide by 100, then you multiply by 100. 100 goes away, we just get 46. Okay, so let me type that up. So to go from a decimal to a percent, we multiply by 100. Okay, conversely, if you want to go from a percent to a decimal, you would divide by 100. All right, and then again, we could go straight from that fraction to a percent by kind of using that percent proportion. 46%, that's 46 divided by 100. Okay, so that's why it's 46%. Those are equivalent ratios. And then 46 100ths is 46 100ths. 46 hundredths, 0.46. All right, so those are important rules to know if you don't know. Okay, great job, everyone.